This is Just Tool Basics, and today we're talking about marking gauges. Hello everyone, welcome to Just Tool Basics. Today's topic is marking gauges. We're going to talk about two different types, the two types that I have. First is the basic beam style single blade marking gauge, sometimes called a wheel marking gauge because the marking device is this circular blade that can be sharpened or replaced. The basic idea of a marking gauge, and it goes for the other one that we'll talk about in a second as well, is that to indicate where you need to make a cut a mortise, something like that, on a piece of wood, using a blade makes the mark a lot less likely to be erased, sanded out, something like that. And I realize that this is a little bit hard to see on the screen, but this is what a marking gauge does, is it makes a score line in the piece of wood so that you can then reference that to make your cut your mortise, whatever you need to do. This style, works with this thumb screw that allows you to adjust the distance of the fence from the blade or scorer. It's pretty straightforward. This is brass because it's slightly softer than steel, I guess, and looks fancier. I'm not sure why else it needs to be brass, but it is, and it's very common that they are. Some of these come with graduations marked on the beam itself so that you can use that as a measurement. I don't really care about that. I use a trusted measuring device, some sort of ruler or calipers or something like that, to set my width, or you can just set it to the width of your chisel if you're doing a mortise or something like that, and just use that to make your mark. If you want to use this to measure, feel free to shop for that sort of marking gauge. This other kind is a dual blade marking gauge. This is a Japanese tool. It's known as a wari kebiki. Kebiki being marking gauge, wari kebiki because it's a double. This has two marking blades. I need to loosen a little bit more. As you can see, they are sistered together and they can slide separately in the static beam. This beam is glued to the fence, and then these two marking blades slide in there and can be then pinned down with this thumb screw, similar to the thumb screw on the other one. The advantage here is that if you need to mark parallel lines, and for cutting mortises or something like that, you can set this to whatever the appropriate width is and then mark your parallel lines in one motion as opposed to having to do two things. So you'd set this to the width of a chisel or whatever it is, and then run the fence down the board, same as the single marking gauge, except that now you make parallel lines and then you can chop that out in between. The advantage to this too is that you can actually retract that inside one and make it so that you only have one blade out. So, for example, if we were marking the top of this mortise, you could then do that with that single blade if you wanted. There are advantages to a marking gauge as opposed to using a pencil, or there are marking gauges that allow you to mount a pencil and draw a line with it to use the fence as opposed to, setting down a ruler and making a mark. The advantage to this scoring style is that the depth of this allows you to hook your chisel into it, so that way you have a very positive register as to the alignment to your mark. And same with a saw. You can, with a very fine pull saw, if you're marking the end, you can actually get the teeth to hook into that very slight score in order to better align your cut. So as you can see, this one is made primarily out of wood with metal blades. These blades are fancier than average with their You can see that there's a hollow grind so that you can sharpen it relatively easily, though it is still a little bit of a pain in the butt to sharpen. There are styles that are similar to this that use pins, basically nails, that are through the beam, and the wooden beam slides as opposed to having the blades on a separate kind of slot. There are designs where instead of these nested style blades, it's a side-by-side dual beam that slides individually because they're parallel lines, so it doesn't terribly matter that they're not parallel in 2 dimensions. However, it does make it a little bit harder to start and stop the two in the same spot because they're misaligned. So the one will go before the other. So minor point, and that's one of the reasons why I like this style. Also, the slicing of the blade as opposed to the scratching of a pin is a little bit more precise. Tends to not wander on the grain as much. There are quite a few websites that have designs for making your own wooden-based marking gauge, and I really recommend that you make one. I made my first one was one that I made. I've since lost it, or at least I couldn't find it for this video. That was done with kind of a basic arrangement like this. It was single beam or a single scratcher with a nail pushed through it, and it worked great for a while until I got this one, and it was fancier, and so I stuck with that. I did want to mention one other thing. If you have dial or vernier calipers that are more modern and made out of hardened stainless steel, these tips are very sharp and very hard. You can use these as at least as a single. I wouldn't recommend trying to do this as a double, but actually I can use this side. You can reference the one on the outside and pull a scratch with that, and you can see that works reasonably well. Not as accurate, not as precise as this blade where it's doing a true slice. Same with this wheel cutter. However, if ultra precision isn't your goal, this works quite well and will certainly do better than using a pencil. So, and I'll have another video about these vernier calipers some other time, but for now, I think that's all we have to say about marking gauges. So until next time, this is Just Tool Basics.